Hello class, this is Marge Gorthy. I will be the instructor for the mammography course at Greenwich Academy. And we're going to be going over the first chapter of your book. And this is the history of mammography. So we're going to break this down into three main eras of breast imaging. We have 1924 through 1965, which is the discovery of mammography as primarily a diagnostic tool. Then 1965 through 1983 is development of dedicated processors, dedicated techniques for processing, and dedicated equipment. And then in 1983 to the present, we will talk a little bit about the refinement of our technology and the new technology to help find cancers earlier and earlier. So you probably want to follow along with your textbook and open up to chapter 1. Some of these figures you're going to have to refer to in your book. And the first one is figure 1-1. This is on page 3. And what this is it's showing you a chest X-ray, a PA chest X-ray that some radiologists were looking at back in 1924, and they noticed that they could see the soft tissue of the female breasts in this image, and it got one radiologist in particular thinking about this and thinking, we could come up with a way to image the breast as a diagnostic tool. So more and more work was done on trying different techniques with our existing X-ray equipment, primarily on patients that presented with, usually they were advanced clinical symptoms. And if you look on the next page 4 at figure 1-2, you can see the types of symptoms that patients would present with, and they would then go and x-ray the breast to look and see what was going on in the breast, what it looked like radiographically. So they used their general x-ray machines, found that they got best results from a low KVP and a relatively low MA and a high time. It wasn't the most radiation safe exam, but it was the first time that they were able to really see the breast radiographically. They tried using our medical film, X-ray film. They would do a direct exposure, meaning no screens, because they needed to have that type of direct film resolution. And usually we did the 3 views. We did a craniocaudal, a 90-degree lateral, and if they wanted to look at the lateral aspect of the breast or the tail of the breast, a Cleopatra view. And that Cleopatra view is named that because the way that the lady had to be positioned, it looks like Cleopatra when she was reclining on her fainting couch and being fed grapes. However, with all of this in the beginning, it was hard for the radiology community to get support from the rest of the medical community and from the people who developed the technology. I think, that the medical community, primarily the surgeons, were worried that patients were going to be steered away from surgery due to false negatives. And I think that because there really wasn't an impetus to really build on this technology, that the companies that did research and development for medical equipment really didn't have a reason or see a reason to really develop any type of new technology, to put money into developing technology for something that really wasn't going anywhere in their minds. So they worked more and more on getting more dedicated equipment, and there was one company in France called CGR, who developed the first dedicated mammography machine. And you can see a picture of that machine in figure 1-7 on page 6. So they look very much like what our equipment looks like today. Can't do everything that our equipment does today, but really the setup or the configuration is pretty much the same. And then, the images began to improve a lot more. If you look at figure 1-4 on page 5, you can see how a very early image in 1960, you can just kind of see, how homogeneous the breast tissue looks. There's a lack of detail. But in 10 years' time, with some of these changes with dedicated equipment and dedicated film screen technique, you can see a lot more of the fibrous tissue. So there was a lot. So along with that improvement in film screen, in the late 60s, a company called Haloid Corporation, which then became Polaroid, invented a technique called zero mammography. And it used a selenium plate that the image of the breast was on. It got put into a special processing unit that you had to purchase, and it processed onto a piece of white paper a blue and white image of the breast. And it was a very pretty image, and you could see from the skin line all the way back to the ribs. So a lot of facilities really liked this technique and bought into this technique. However, after some 20 years or so, it was discontinued for improvements with film screen. Zero mammography never was able to get the dose down as much as we really wanted it to be. And the equipment, you had to run your plate through a special processor. Once you processed it, then you had to run it through a special conditioner. And these were big pieces of equipment that then cleaned the plate and erased the plate for your next image. And the equipment tended to not only be expensive and big and take up a lot of room, but it was prone to a lot of breakdowns and required a lot of repairs. But with all of our old techniques, especially with zero mammography, we have a lot of leftover habits. And one of those is that the nipple must be in profile. Today, only one of the views will need to have the nipple in profile, because depending on the shape of a woman's breast, or if she's has post-surgical changes in her breast, you may not be able to get that nipple in profile and still get as much breast tissue in the image as possible. So as long as the nipple is in profile in one of the views, then you can sacrifice that in the second view. The other thing that's changed is we used to always accentuate the lateral aspect of the breast in the CC, but what we found is that we were missing the medial tissue completely. So we started to really emphasize getting as much of the medial tissue in the CC as possible. And then because with especially zero mammography, we always could visualize the skin line, we really missed that when we went to film screen, because by the time you got enough penetration to really look through and see the fibrous tissue in a lady's breast, you were then burning out the skin line. So what happened is, we understood that where you're really interested in looking is in the fibrous tissue of the breast. And if a physician really wanted to look at that skin line, he could hot light it and look at it. And usually if there's something going on with the women's skin line, you're going to be able to see that clinically. So we gave that up. That got fixed with digital mammography now, because they have these algorithms that can display the skin and subcutaneous tissue, as well as make sure that you're penetrating the breast mound.